Welcome to my Satisfactory factory tour. My name is Miro, and in this video I will show you my take on how a Satisfactory factory can look. Just as a quick warning, if you are new to the game or have not progressed very far, this will probably contain some spoilers for you, so if you do not like that, you probably shouldn't watch this video. Right now I am walking on my oil belts to my base. As you can see, I have 4 Mark IV belts, plus 2 on top to get back and forth more quickly. I don't actually use all 4 of these belts, as you will shortly see, but I still ran all 4 of them just so that I can, if I need more oil, I can just grab it. I don't use trucks, because I have found trucks to be rather unreliable. They would always run out of fuel and get stuck, and you would have to go rescue them, and that's not much fun. So instead I ran belts, even though that is incredibly expensive. As you can imagine, running 6 Mark IV belts that long takes a lot of encased beams. Anyway, so I use 3 of these belts. The first of them goes directly into a set of refineries for rubber. So this is exactly sized so that it takes in one full belt, one full 450 per minute of crude oil, and outputs one full belt of rubber, which takes exactly 15 refineries, which I have here. The other 2 belts that I use get split into 3, so each of these output belts get 300 crude oil. 600 feed into this plastic refinery, where I have 20 refineries just producing plastic. And again, this is sized so that it outputs exactly 1 belt of plastic. I don't really use all that plastic and all the rubber, but I just, in general, my main bus is using Mark IV belts, and so I'm trying to just exhaust that so that when I need more plastic or more rubber, I don't have to resize the production site, but just can rely on it working. The last 300 oil just feed into 5 refineries for fuel, and the fuel is then used, as you can imagine, for fuel generators. So I have 16 fuel generators, and that is sized just so it uses up all the fuel I produced, basically. And from the surplus, like if my factory is running more slowly or like under capacity, the surplus just gets stored for my jetpack. So you might think that 16 fuel generators is a lot or enough, but it is actually not my main power source. It turns out that, as far as I know, like at least if I'm not mistaken, fuel is actually a less efficient power source than coal. So per resource node of oil you get less energy than per resource node of coal. And so I am still mostly running on coal, or rather to a good significant degree still running on coal. And so I have 38 coal generators over here. They should be actually 41, because you need 40.5 to consume 1 full coal belt. But I could not yet quite figure out where to put the 3 other generators. So for now I just have 38, but that is 1.9 gigawatts, and that's fine. I have a dedicated pure coal mine over there that is fully overclocked and just only used for power. In terms of power usage, I also have 2 geothermal generators that produce 400 megawatts in total, but as you can imagine, if I have 16 fuel generators, that will give me, I think, around 2 gigawatts, and I have 38 coal generators that also give me almost 2 gigawatts. The geothermal doesn't actually do that much. As you can see right now, I use 3.5 gigawatts roughly. That is because I just drained all my storage, so I threw away all my items just so that we could actually see the factory working and see how much power it uses. At peak, like if, for example, I blow a fuse and have to turn on my factory again, I don't know how much it uses. I got into the situation once and I only got out of it by disconnecting all my refineries. So I think I should be around 5 or 6 gigawatts total power usage. So as you can already tell, that is quite a lot of power, and I will now show you what that's used for. So let's first go to the hub. Okay, so the hub itself is pretty insignificant, as you might imagine. I have done all the research, but apart from that, I just use it to handcraft as you would. As you might notice, I don't have a space elevator anywhere. The reason for that is that it just took up too much space, and so I deconstructed it at some point. And also, I have all the research, so I don't really have a use for it right now. I will have to figure out where to put that once new tiers get added, but for now, I think I don't really need it, so that's fine. This is the main goal of my factory for now. It's the storage I use for handcrafting and for building things. I basically have one storage container per item with little displays, just by taking a belt and putting it directly onto a pole to see what is where. And I have most of the items in their own storage container, with the exception of screws and stators and some ingots. But in general, whatever I need, I just have here at a glance. I do not yet have supercomputers and I do not yet have AI limiters, but that is gonna come soon. Yes, on the right you can see my biofuel processing thing. This is just so when I collect leaves or whatever, I can just put them in here, and then I have one constructor per thing that you can make into biomass, and one constructor to make that into biofuel, and then I just store biofuel and biomass. So this is not because I really need it, but mainly because I just don't want to throw away leaves and wood, but I do have to clear out trees fairly regularly, and so that is where they end up in the end. That is the only reason for that to exist. Anyway, so let's hop onto that building so that I can give you an overview. Alright, so this is an overview over the factory. As you can see, I have a main bus design. I will give you a close-up of that in a second. Every item I produce and that is used ends up on there, and the individual buildings can then take resources they need and put resources on there. The general layout is that each item gets produced in its own dedicated building, and as you can see, they are color-coded. Not that the colors actually mean anything, it's just so I don't, I always know where I am. This building over there is not actually a factory. This building over there is the sarcophagus. This is where the poisonous gas stones are that are probably annoying you too, and I did not want to accidentally run into them all the time, and so I put them in a block. Anyway, so the way this is set up is so that each building produces one item. In general, each floor is self-balanced, so if there are multiple steps to producing something, I will put in the correct amount of constructors and assemblers and whatever needed, so that they output everything in multiples of belts of different tiers. There are exceptions to that, especially for the more expensive items, but in general I tend to try and balance them internally. And then if I need more of a sorted item, just like there, I can just pop on another floor, and so I can basically scale horizontally as much as I want. I don't scale between the buildings, so I pretty much just throw everything on the bus, and only if I notice that the bus is running low on certain items, I will scale up production of that. So it's not that I like produce the right amount of plates for whatever. I just tend to try and overscale things so that I always have enough, and then if I don't, I scale up. The individual buildings do, the blue building here does iron plates. It's quite small because it turns out you don't really need that many iron plates. It's also one of the oldest buildings. The red building behind that is doing the iron bars. And I will give you a look into the buildings in a second, into some of the buildings in a second, but just so you like roughly know how I split things up. The pink building with the 2 floors is producing reinforced plates. The white building is doing concrete, so this takes in one full build of like one full Mark IV build of limestone and outputs 150 concrete. And by the way, the building I'm standing on, as you can see, it has 3 floors. The lowest floor is white, the upper 2 are yellow, and this is the smelter. So each floor contains 15 smelters, which is enough to smelt 1 full belt of iron or copper ore, and output 1 full belt of iron or copper ingots. And the lowest floor outputs copper or smelts copper, and the other 2 floors smelt iron. So this is where my iron comes in, gets smelted, and then put on the main bus and made into plates and bars and all the rest. Anyway, the turquoise building over there is producing, the turquoise building over there is producing steel beams. It has 2 floors, each floor producing 30 beams, meaning I produce 60 steel beams per minute. And behind that you can see a small building for a more or less small building that is producing reinforced steel beams. That building is like encased steel beams. That building is definitely undersized, so I will probably, like, one of the next things I will have to do is triple or quadruple that. As you can imagine, all of this is level 4 belts, Mark IV belts, and I have this 6-fold belt all the way from my oil fields, so I do use quite a lot of encased beams. Like in total, I have probably used at least 30,000 beams, encased beams yet, and so I currently only produce 16 beams per minute, which is just not enough to keep up with that. So as you can imagine, I had to like leave my computer running overnight, quite a lot. Anyway, the dark gray building over there is producing modular frames, and behind that is rotors and motors. I produce rotors and stators and motors in the same building because stators are not actually used anywhere except in motor production, and so just putting them in the same building and not actually putting the stators on the bus made a lot of sense. The green building, the small green building, contains the production of heavy modular frames, and the orange building behind that is the foundry that is producing steel. So that takes in 1 full belt of iron and 1 full belt of coal, and making that into 300 iron ingots per minute. The purple building on the right is my newest building. It produces copper. It's the copper factory, so it takes in 1 full belt of copper ingots. The lower the lower floor produces wires and only wires. So the lower floor contains 30 constructors, producing 3 full belts of wire. These 3 belts are then directly in the building fed to the second floor, which produces cable. And so that takes, it also has 30 constructors and produces 450 cables per minute, and that actually leaves 450 wires per second over. So I actually get from 1 full belt of copper, I get 1 belt of wire and 1 belt of cable. I initially didn't put wires and cables on the bus, simply because the they expand belt space. So one belt of copper makes 3 belts of wire. So actually ferrying around wire seemed quite expensive in the beginning. However, I recently needed cable in a recipe, and it just turned out to not be economical because it takes 2 steps to make that on site. And so instead I decided to put it in a bus. And because you actually end up with 1 full belt of wire and 1 full belt of cable, I think I'm fine with that. Anyway, behind that, the yellow building is quake wire. That takes in 1 full belt of Ethereum ore and outputs 1 full belt of quake wire. And behind that is circuit boards, then computers, and at the very end, high-speed connectors. High-speed connectors also being a very new addition. Anyway, so that is the rough overview. In terms of resource input, I have 3 normal iron nodes over here that are mined by fully overclocked Mark II miners, which gives me 2 full belts of iron ore that are smelted directly. I have 8 impure nodes at the other end of the factory, but of these I only use 3, I think, that are also fully overclocked, and they are used to give me 1 full belt of iron that is then fed into the steel production. I will probably have to double up the steel production to actually get more encased beams. I also have 3, I think, yes, 3 limestone miners for 1 full belt of limestone. All of them are impure. And I have 2 coal mines, 1 dedicated to power, 1 dedicated to steel, both pure and producing 1 full belt. And I have 1 impure copper and 2 more impure coppers over there, and they are overclocked to give me exactly 1 full belt. So they are not fully overclocked, but 1 belt is all I need for now, so that's fine. Anyway, so let's see some of the buildings from the inside. Okay, so this is the iron plate production. This is a very vanilla layout, so I just have the input coming down the middle, and it gets split into rows of constructors that are completely symmetrical, and the outputs of these constructors then get merged into the output of the building. And so if there is a resource, an item that only takes like a constructor to construct, then you can pretty much bet that that is how that looks. It might be differently sized. As I said, I try to do it in multiple of belts, but yeah, in general it will just be this. And as you can see, I paint all the machines and all the splitters and mergers in the same color as the building, just so that I get oriented again, like just so I always know where I am. Anyway, so that is a constructor building. Let's look at an assembler building. Okay, so this is producing reinforced plates, and as you might have noticed, I don't have screws in my storage core on the bus. Instead, I do create screws locally where I need them, which is only here. So I do have an alternative recipe that creates screws from ingots directly. They get fed into here into 4 constructors, producing 360 screws per minute in total. And these get fed into 3 assemblers. So this is balanced in terms of screw production, and they produce reinforced iron plates. So this is basically a more or less a normal assembler building, even though like the only difference is that this also has the screw production at the other end. If you just cut it off in the middle, that would be what a normal assembler building looks for me. At least in the beginning. I have now actually started redesigning some of the buildings to be more compact, but this works. Anyway, moving on. So the simplest buildings are actually the manufacturer buildings, because they just, oh, I just saw that this actually should be painted, but I don't have my paint gun. Anyway, these just contain a manufacturer and some input bulbs and some output bulbs. So super simple. This constructs the heavy modular frames. In general, with most of the manufacturing things, it's oh, I use an alternative recipe as I often use for most of the stuff. That's just easier to create. Where was I? With the manufacturer items, I don't usually care that much about like speed with which they create items, because these items are usually only needed in very low quantities, and I usually have, like, usually all my storage is actually run full, and so if I take out a stack of heavy modular frames, I don't really care whether it takes an hour or whatever to produce all of them again. So that's why I only have one manufacturer per one of any of these. One thing we see very well here is how I multiplex between different floors. So this is the reinforced plate factory, and the way this works is just I have 2 input belts and 1 output belt. So the middle one in this case is the output belt, and the outputs just connect via a merger onto the output belt, and the inputs just use a splitter to get up take up 1 belt, and then the belts feed around, go up 1 floor, turn around again, and then this repeats. So this is basically how I achieve horizontal scaling. If I need to add another floor, I can just increase the like add another level to the elevator, do all the same symmetrical splittings and mergings, and that just works. So just to show you that too. Okay, this is the rotor and motor building. As you can see, I am constructing wires like locally. As I said, I didn't want to put wires on the bus initially, and this building predates the copper factory, so I am still producing them locally. So I have 4 constructors producing wires, and they feed into 3 assemblers together with steel pipes. The assemblers use an alternative recipe for rotors. The reason for that is so that I can use the same ingredients for rotors that I use for stators. And so I have 1 assembler for stators and 2 assemblers for rotors, because rotors are actually needed to construct some machines, and so I need more rotors separately than stators. And 2/3 of 1 assembler are exactly 6 per minute, 6 rotors per minute, and the stator assembler also produces 6 per minute. So the 2 of these are basically the same speed and feed into the motor assembler. Yes. And the stators are not actually put on a bus or anything, they just stay internal, whereas both of the rest of the stators from that machine and all the rest of the rotors from that machine and and all the rotors from this machine get fed as an output to the outside. So this is the rotor and motor building. Okay, lastly, let's take a quick look at the design of the main bus. I have stacked poles, as you would expect, and as you can see, I leave a level of belts between them. The reason for that is that allows me to put in jitters and mergers without too much clipping, and also without the annoyance of if I have to deconstruct the belt and reconstruct it, I don't do that to then also have to deconstruct the adjacent jitters and mergers. But mainly I just want to prevent clipping too badly if I can. For the same reason, there's also a little bit of extra horizontal space between them. That also allows me to put in these extra poles, which the top half of this is actually not needed. And they are used so that I can, when I branch off different resources, I can thread them through the unused layers. with these extra poles. And so whenever I need a resource, I would just put in a splitter, like here, and then thread out the resource to the outside. And then when the constructed item comes in, which is in this case over here, so I have to actually, yeah, wherever it comes in, I would just, oops, again, thread it in, put in a splitter, and feed it in both directions to the bus. And the reason I do it in both directions is so that I can use the items no matter at what point in the factory I want to add a new building. Of course, they will not be like balanced between all the buildings correctly, but as I said, that's fine. Usually my factory is completely saturated, all my storage is full, all these belts are just completely filled, and I don't really have to care about balancing that much. It's just that right now it's not, because I just emptied my storage. Anyway, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. If you do have any questions, or if you want me to make any more videos like this, please let me know. And for the record, like, this is an exception. This is not actually, I am not an actual YouTuber, so I don't know if I will make any more videos, but if you want to, you can of course like, comment and subscribe and hit the little bell to get notified, but as I said, don't expect too much. Anyway, see you later. Bye.